The new mountains gave us shelter. We made a fire in their mouths. The tribes split the lands. The tyrants roared and fought. There were many kingdoms. It was good for many winters. The tribes grew, and they grew too much. Now we follow the sun once more.
Ogre Kingdoms is the rightful and sovereign domain of the large and brutish Ogre race. Wandering tribes of ogres can be found wrecking their way across the globe, erecting many strongholds and plundering far-off and exotic lands, the likes of which no man will ever see in their lifetime. Yet no matter how far away they may be, all ogres refer to the scattered tribal kingdoms that dominate the slopes and river valleys of the mountains of Morn, their rightful, hard-earned homeland. It is here, against the frozen peaks and blistering blizzards, that mighty tyrants rule over their own brutal kingdoms, warring against each other, looting, extorting and ransacking all before them as a tribute to their own gluttonous appetite and their ever-hungry god, the Great Maw. They fight as thugs, bandits and mercenaries, their hulking numbers coming from a wide diversity of warmongering tribes scattered all across the mountain range. They pick on the strong and the weak alike, battling mighty foes and powerful kingdoms many thousands of miles away, all for the alluring promise of gold, plunder and meat. Even here, amongst the peaks where they hold claim to all, fearsome beasts and mighty creatures dominate the dark corners of their realm, preying on all who come too close. Yet such is the ogre's ferocious, stubborn and ever-ravenous nature that they see these creatures not as a foe to cower and hide from, but as a challenge that needs to be brought down, crushed beneath their boots, and eaten to fill their hungry bellies. Armies have come and gone throughout the ages into the mountains, but only the ogres can truly claim to have conquered it all. It was the ogres who fought and brought down the mighty sky titans of the upper peaks, bringing their civilization low and condemning their children to exile or enslavement. It is they who once claimed a mighty realm within the great steppes of the Far East, battling the great empire of Cathay for supremacy, before the day came that their malevolent and ever-hungry god, the Great Maw, punished the ogres for their sins and brought about the great migration of their race. That was many thousands of years ago, and as the ogres grow in numbers once more, the cycle of history is set to repeat itself. Should nothing stop them now, it is said that the ogres will stop at nothing to devour every living thing within this ravaged world.
A great toothed comet came. It grew closer by the day. Fire roared in the sky, killed the night, and drove the beasts mad. The Maw was born from the fire. The earth shook at its coming. The flames ate many tribes, and to the mountains some fled.
The Great Maw, primary and sole deity of the religion of the ogre races, Their relationship with this entity is not just one of devotion, but also one of fear, for the Great Maw was once responsible for the near destruction of the entire Ogre race at an earlier point of time. From what scholars could get from Ogre folktale and stories, the Great Maw was a deity recorded long before the rise of men, in the land just north of the present-day land of Cathay. From information gathered by Ogre witnesses during that time, the Great Maw is described as a gaping mouth of razor-sharp teeth, where an endless chasm lay at the very centre of the pit, where some say he has burrowed deep into the core of the earth, continuously eating until he finally reached the other side of the world. Scholars, however, believe that the Great Maw was not a deity at all, but simply a meteorite of great size that hit the Ogre's original homeland. It is theorized by scholars that due to the Ogre's small brain and extreme tendency to over-exaggerate things, the Ogres believed that the comet was a vengeful godlike thing that ate the whole Ogre race and their lands as punishment for their sins. Scholars also theorized that when it was hit, the force of the impact was so devastating that the crater itself was miles long, and the impacting force made many rock formations spiking out on the outer rim of the crater, creating the illusion of a massive gaping maw. It is also speculated, however, that due to the Ogre's constant worship of this deity, this god has manifested within the warp itself, as is evident in the Ogre's unique use of gut magic. Now it is the main deity being worshipped in the mountains of Maw. Many thousands of years ago, the Ogres lived far to the east of the mountains of Maw, in the great sweeping plains and the borders of far-off Cathay. Their homelands were fertile and rolling grasslands spread from horizon to horizon, with grazing new beast and lumbering yak, providing an ever-replenishing supply of fresh meat. With no natural barriers to divide the two kingdoms, the majority of Ogre tribes lived as nomads, trading almost as often as fighting. The great secret of fire was passed to them by the Cathayan neighbours, who in return began to recruit more intelligent Ogres into the Grand Imperial Army. Tribe upon tribe prowled the rolling steppes as their numbers grew. However, Ogre raids soon began to stray too close to Cathay itself, preying on the simple peasants working in rice fields. Before long, many Ogres had acquired a taste for Cathayan flesh. This was something which His Most Excellent Majesty Zhen Hyung, Celestial Dragon Emperor of the Imperial Palace of Grand Cathay, took a very dim view of indeed. Whether Zhen Huang's coven of ancient astromancers had anything to do with the catastrophe that befell the Ogres remains speculated, but not too long after the children of the land began to go missing and bloodied bones littered the paddy fields, a great burning light appeared in the sky. It increased in brightness and size with every passing day, until it eclipsed even the great spheres of Morsleb and Mansleb. Over the weeks, it grew to be a baleful, glowering orb that cracked and spat above the plains, turning night into day and driving the wildlife of the steppes mad with fear. A crown of sickly green light came into focus around the comet as it grew ever closer, and fanciful observers even claimed that this new celestial body had a face, or more accurately, a mouth. One sweltering night, the comet slammed into the heart of the Ogre homeland with such force and magnitude that it was felt on the other side of the world. All life around it boiled away in an instant. 2/3 of the Ogre population were annihilated as the steppes liquefied under the hammer blow of an angry god. The raging, blinding firestorms that followed the comet's fall incinerated everything for miles around. Had there been any survivors left to peer into the massive crater left by the comet's descent, they would have seen that the comet had not stopped on contact, but instead burrowed deep into the heart of the world. For the devastated tribes of Ogres, the worst was yet to come. Their verdant homelands had been reduced to a searing desert of howling sandstorms and baleful eldritch energies that stripped the skin from bones. Other than the remnants of the ogre population, only a few species of insects had the resilience to survive the disaster, and starvation quickly set in. The surviving tribes degenerated into cannibalism, falling upon each other in fear and hunger as the drought and lack of food gnawed away at their once full bellies. To the ogres it seemed that a vengeful god had fallen upon them, consuming all before it, a great and terrible maw that existed purely to feed. Thus the insatiable and merciless god of the ogres was born. The strongest and hardiest of the ogres, even after having eaten their weaker brethren, found that the gnawing hunger visited upon them at the time of the Great Moor's arrival would not leave. No longer able to cross into Cathay due to the poisonous desolation left in the god's wake, the majority of the survivors migrated into the mountain ranges to the west in search of a new homeland and respite from the great drought. However, one of the oldest ogre legends tells of Groth Onefinger, who led his tribe further into the deadly desert with the intention of offering sacrifices to his new and powerful god. What he found has since been depicted on 1,000 gut plates and banners, and is forever etched into the legends of their race. Before the ogres lay a massive and gigantic, gaping crater the size of which stretched for miles, filled with ridges upon ridges of jagged teeth and rippling, convulsing muscle that stretched down and down into nothingness. A gullet so huge that it could swallow a race like the ogres and still hunger for more. It exists there even now, a vile, pulsing god visited upon the face of the world by the vengeful heavens.